There's nothing more insulting than being told what to do on your own land, especially by a man who's never worked a day with his hands. I bought the place for the quiet. A 5-acre ranch nestled at the edge of Willow Creek Estates. Close enough to civilization for my kid's school and my wife's job, but far enough out that I could breathe without hearing a leaf blower at 7 a.m. every Saturday. I'd saved for 10 years, sold off my family's cattle operation back in Oklahoma, and moved here for a fresh start. The neighborhood came with an HOA. I knew that going in. Everyone told me, it's just to keep things tidy. You'll never even notice them. They were wrong. You always notice people who think they own you. The face of the HOA was Douglas Grayson, 60s, sun-spotted, and silver hair like he earned every inch of superiority he carried in his stiff collar. He wasn't elected. He was appointed. His cronies ran the board like a private club, enforcing the bylaws with the zeal of small-town tyrants who'd never outgrown high school politics. For a while, I kept my head down, painted the bar neutral brown to blend with community tones, paid their quarterly dues. Didn't say much when they fined my neighbor, an 85-year-old widow, because her mailbox paint was chipped. But you give a man like Grayson a rule book and no leash, and eventually he comes for everyone. My crime? A yard sale. It started innocently enough. My youngest, Sarah, was off to college in the fall, and my wife, Marie, wanted to turn the upstairs into her art studio. That meant clearing out 2 decades of junk. Bicycles nobody rode, 3 busted leaf blowers, and enough unused power tools to stock a small hardware store. I figured I'd set up some tables under the old oak tree out front, slap up a few signs at the edge of the road, and make a weekend out of it. By noon Saturday, the sale was in full swing. A slow parade of minivans rolled down our gravel driveway. Kids picked through toy bins while dads argued over socket sets. I had country music on low from the Bluetooth speaker, and a cooler of lemonade set out for anyone who wanted it. It wasn't business. It was a community moment. And then came the black SUV. No sirens, no badges, just tinted windows and entitlement. It rolled up like the Secret Service doing recon, and outstepped Grayson in pleated khakis and an HOA polo shirt tucked so tight it might have cut off his circulation. He wasn't alone. 2 other board members trailed behind, clipboards in hand like they were about to condemn a building. Mr. Travis, Grayson called out, as if he owned the land his loafers touched. We need to talk. I wiped my hands on my jeans and met him halfway. Morning, Doug. You folks thirsty? Lemonade's cold. He didn't smile. You didn't submit a request for this event. A yard sale? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Didn't know I needed a hall pass to sell a few garden tools. Per Article 7, Section C of the Community Standards, he began, voice dipped in condescension. Any commercial activity conducted on a residential property must be formally submitted for approval at least 14 business days in advance. This isn't a business, it's a clean-out. It involves money exchanging hands on your lawn, he snapped. That constitutes commerce. You're in violation. I looked at him, really looked at him. The man had probably never scrubbed mud off his boots or spent a night fixing a busted water line in the dark. Yet here he was, waving policy like scripture. The crowd around us quieted. People stared. Even a little girl, holding a teddy bear, stopped to watch. I'm not shutting it down, I said plainly. Grayson narrowed his eyes. Then I'm escalating this to enforcement. Enforcement, I learned later that day, meant a cease and desist notice shoved in my mailbox, a $500 violation fine, and a visit from what the HOA proudly called their compliance officers. 2 rent-a-cops with clip-on badges who looked like they'd been hired more for intimidation than interpretation of the rules. They parked their golf cart right at the edge of my lawn the next morning, orange cones and all, and told me in practiced monotone that my event had been terminated. When I asked which law I was breaking, one of them squinted at the clipboard and muttered, "Unlicensed vending on private property within HOA jurisdiction." I didn't argue, not because they were right, but because I'd learned something more important. I wasn't dealing with a community. I was dealing with a cartel. That night, Marie sat beside me on the porch swing, watching the sun dip behind the hills. She said nothing for a long while, just listened to crickets and sipped her tea. They think they can do anything, I said, still seething. They do it because no one pushes back, she replied. I nodded. Then maybe it's time someone did. Her hand found mine, a silent affirmation. See, when you push a man hard enough, long enough, he stops trying to play the game and starts rewriting the rules. I wasn't going to fight them in their courtroom of committee meetings and passive-aggressive newsletters. I was going to hit them in the one place they couldn't regulate, the real world. It started with a visit to City Hall. I found the zoning map. My property sat right on the line, technically within HOA bounds, but with a curious easement. A 40-foot stretch along the road classified as mixed-use transitional buffer. That meant one thing. With a proper permit, I could operate a commercial kiosk. I submitted my paperwork, paid the fees, talked to the health department, the fire inspector, the planning commissioner. I filed every form in triplicate. It took 3 weeks. In that time, Grayson and his crew sent 4 more letters, each more aggressively worded than the last. I didn't respond, because I wasn't planning a rebuttal. I was planning a revolution. The idea came to me late one night, sipping stale coffee in the workshop. If they didn't like a weekend yard sale, what would they do about a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week business on their doorstep? Not just any business, either something harmless, something irresistible, something that would shine so brightly they look like fools trying to dim it. A drive-through coffee shop, not a food truck, not a pop-up stand, a real permanent fixture, built on my land, staffed by locals, run like a professional operation. It would bring people in and keep them coming. Every single day. I'd call it the daily drip. By the end of the month, I had a contractor sketching blueprints. A prefab building could be installed in less than a week. I ordered signage. I built a social media presence. I even offered discounts to HOA residents, because nothing stings quite like being outplayed politely. Grayson had no idea what was coming, and I planned to keep it that way until the day I flipped the open sign. The real satisfaction wasn't in the revenge. It was in the preparation. I didn't rush. That's what men like Grayson expected. A temper tantrum, a letter-writing campaign, maybe even a nasty post in the neighborhood Facebook group. But I had no interest in playing into their hands. I wanted precision, impact, something they couldn't sweat away with a citation. And so I moved quietly. By the time fall rolled in, the daily drip was more than an idea. It was a logistical machine. I'd filed every zoning exemption, secured every license, and hired an out-of-town lawyer just to triple-check compliance. I wasn't giving Grayson a single loophole to exploit. Every HOA rule has its limits. They can regulate what color your shutters are, whether your trash cans are visible, or if your lawn grows a 1/4 inch too tall. But what they can't do is override municipal jurisdiction, and I had found the seam, that forgotten 40-foot wide transitional buffer on the edge of my ranch. It was technically outside their authority. I was building on neutral ground. Still, I had to be discreet. I stored materials in the barn, moved deliveries at dawn, and paid in cash when I could. My contractor, a Vietnam vet named Reggie with gravel voice and no patience for bureaucracy, loved the mission once I let him in on it. Wait, he grinned, looking over the site plan. So you're telling me we're building a coffee joint right across from those HOA suits who shut down your yard sale? I nodded. Well, he said, cracking his knuckles, that's the most American damn thing I've ever heard. We broke ground on a Tuesday morning. A few curious neighbors drove past slowly, necks craning, trying to decipher what was going up. I didn't wave, let them wonder. The less they knew, the better. The building itself was simple. Sleek prefab panels with warm cedar trim, matte black signage with bold white lettering. We mounted a menu board, installed a drive-through window, laid asphalt for the loop-around lane. Solar panels lined the roof, partially for energy, partially for flair. I even invested in a triple-group espresso machine. If I was doing this, I was doing it right. The HOA caught wind of it during week 2. They sent a letter. Of course, not certified, just slipped passive-aggressively into my mailbox. Mr. Travis, we've noticed construction on your property that may be in violation of community development codes. Please submit project plan for review immediately. Failure to comply could result in escalating fines and legal action. Willow Creek Estates HOA Compliance Committee. I filed a letter in the same place I put their last four, the shredder, but this time I replied, "Dear Mr. Grayson, thank you for your concern. As the project falls outside HOA jurisdiction, no submission is required. If you have further questions, I suggest contacting the City Zoning Office. Reference permit #C 042199D. Warm regards, Marshall Travis." The warm regards was a cherry on top. 2 days later, Grayson showed up. He didn't drive his usual luxury SUV. He came in a government-looking sedan, passenger seat occupied by a red-haired woman in a blazer, clutching a manila folder like it might explode. I was on site, helping Reggie guide the awning into place. Grayson stood at the edge of the property like he expected the ground to bite him. He didn't say a word at first, just stared at the sign overhead like it personally offended him. Finally, he cleared his throat. "This is your doing, then?" "Morning, Doug," I said. "Care for a sample menu?" He ignored the offer. "You're violating community standards." "Nope," I said, tapping the metal permit tag already mounted on the utility box. "City property, city jurisdiction, zone transitional. Every code, regulation, and health requirement has been signed, sealed, and approved. Even the plumbing inspection pass." The woman beside him shifted uncomfortably. Grayson's jaw clenched. "It's the principal, Travis." "No," I replied. "It's the power." And for once, he had none. They left without another word. But the storm was far from over. Grayson didn't give up. That's not how he was wired. He shifted strategies from legal to social. First came the rumors. A few bored loyalists started whispering that I was turning the neighborhood into a commercial strip, that my business would lower property values, bring in strangers, and invite crime. One board member's husband even claimed they'd seen drug deals in my driveway. A complete fabrication, but loud enough that the gossip started spreading. Next came the resistance campaign. The HOA launched a Protect Willow Creek initiative, flyers and mailboxes, a website with stock photos of overrun communities, and even petition demanding the city reconsider the coffee shop's permits. They framed it like a grassroots effort, but it was clearly a top-down operation. Grayson's fingerprints were all over it. But something unexpected happened. People didn't buy it. Not all of them. Anyway, in fact, some folks were curious, even excited. A handful dropped by during construction just to ask what kind of roast we'd be using or if we'd serve breakfast sandwiches. A young couple from 3 streets over told me they hated driving 15 minutes to the nearest coffee shop and would gladly support something local. And then there was Clara Mendoza, a quiet, retired schoolteacher who lived 2 doors down and hadn't spoken more than 10 words to me in 2 years. One afternoon, as I was hauling sacks of coffee beans into storage, she appeared at the fence line. "I heard what they're saying," she said, voice thin but steady. I wiped my brow. "They say a lot of things. They said I shouldn't plant tulips in my front yard last spring," she added. "Too chaotic. I planted twice as many." I smiled. "You like coffee, Clara?" She nodded. "Strong. Black. No nonsense." "Then you'll love what we're brewing." She didn't say another word, just tipped her head and walked off. Grayson's campaign was failing. He didn't understand that people were tired of being micromanaged, fined for nonsense, and treated like children by a board that forgot it worked for community, not above it. Opening day arrived on a crisp Saturday morning. The signage gleamed. The espresso machines hissed. A line of curious customers snaked down the loop. I stood at the drive-thru window, apron on, handing out our very first order. A double espresso to a guy in a dented pickup. "Been waiting for this place to open," he said with a grin. "Heard the HOA try to kill it." "Not this time," I replied. At 9:15 a.m., a familiar vehicle crept past the window, Grayson's SUV. He didn't stop, didn't even turn his head, but I knew he saw the crowd, heard the music, smelled the fresh ground beans. The daily drip wasn't just a business. It was a message, and the war had only just begun. The real war didn't start with a lawsuit or a letter. It started with cones. 3 weeks after the Daily Drip opened its drive-thru window, traffic along Willow Creek Lane had noticeably changed. Cars rolled in steadily from sunup to long after dusk. Mothers in minivans, landscapers grabbing double-shot lattes, teenagers treating themselves to fraps with syrup swirls. It was calm, controlled, business was good. Then one Monday morning, I woke up to find bright orange cones lining the edge of my driveway, blocking the entrance. A plastic private road. Residents-only sign was staked into the median. I stared at it, jaw clenched. Marie stood beside me, hands on her hips. They really did it. Oh, yeah, I muttered. Grayson finally made his move. The cones weren't just symbolic. They were a direct attempt to choke my business. And they weren't placed by the city. No, I recognized a little HOA logo stenciled at the base. It was a DIY barricade meant to scare customers away, to claim authority where none existed. I called the city's public works department. A polite woman named Denise informed me there had been no authorization for any closures on my road segment. I took photos, sent emails, and within hours, a city inspector arrived, clipboard in hand, shaking his head. By noon, the cones were gone, but the message had landed. Grayson had escalated. That week, the pressure campaign intensified. Flyers appeared on mailboxes again, claiming the Daily Drip had increased noise pollution, attracted loiterers, and posed a threat to Willow Creek's character. They cited anonymous reports of litter, traffic violations, even drug activity. It was nonsense. I ran the place clean. Security cameras covered the lot. Trash bins were emptied daily, and every employee, from my high school baristas to retired Clara, who worked weekends, took pride in keeping things spotless. But that didn't stop the HOA. Grayson called for an emergency town hall. No one mentioned my name in the flyer, but the topic was obvious: reclaiming the character of Willow Creek Estates. I went, not to speak, just to watch. The meeting was held in the community center, a beige-walled room with fluorescent lights and foldable chairs. The usual crowd had gathered, retirees with clipboards, stressed-out moms balancing toddlers, and that one guy who always complained about the pool hours. The air buzzed with murmurs. Grayson stood at the front, flanked by his board. He tapped the mic. Good evening. I want to thank everyone for coming. Tonight, we're addressing a matter that's disrupted the peaceful harmony of our community. Someone near the back muttered, "Here we go." Grayson continued, unfazed. As many of you are aware, a commercial operation has begun conducting business within proximity to Willow Creek. While technically outside our direct jurisdiction, it's causing increased vehicle congestion, noise, and general discomfort for nearby residents. He clicked a button. A slideshow appeared, photos of my coffee shop, cropped to look menacing. One showed a teen on a skateboard, waiting in line. Another caught a truck idling near the drive-thru. This, Grayson said, voice heavy with faux disappointment, is not in the spirit of Willow Creek. I saw heads nod. Not many, but enough. Fear is contagious when wrapped in formality. Then something surprising happened. Clara Mendoza stood up. She wasn't on the agenda. No one expected her to speak. But she walked to the mic, uninvited, and calmly adjusted it to her height. "My name is Clara," she said. "I've lived here 29 years. I taught half your children, and I'd like to say something." The room hushed. I walk to the Daily Drip every Saturday. It's safe. It's friendly. It's the first time in years I've seen neighbors from other streets talking, laughing, exchanging names. That place didn't hurt our community. It reminded it how to act like one. Grayson's face twitched. Clara didn't stop. The traffic? It's no worse than school drop-off. The noise? It's just music and voices. If this board is so concerned about character, maybe it should worry less about espresso machines and more about the way we treat each other. She stepped back. The silence was deafening. Then someone clapped. Just one person. Then another. Within seconds, half the room was applauding. Not all of them, but enough. Grayson tried to recover. "Thank you for your perspective, Clara. But..." "No, but," she said, already walking back to her seat. Sometimes you're just wrong. The tide had shifted, just slightly, but it was enough to put Grayson on edge. The next week, a lawyer's letter arrived at my door, not from the city, from the HOA's private counsel. Dear Mr. Travis, we received complaints alleging your commercial activities constitute a nuisance and diminish property values. As such, we are considering legal action under the doctrine of private nuisance. We strongly urge you to cease 24/7 operations and comply with a revised operating schedule to be discussed at the next board meeting. This is not a threat. It is a warning. That last sentence made me laugh. I forwarded the letter to my own attorney, a former JAG officer named Victoria Cho who lived 2 towns over and loved nothing more than bulldozing over paper pushers with inflated egos. Her response? Marshall, tell them to pound sand. We're operated within city code, and nuisance is subjective and unenforceable without actual damages, which they can't prove. Also, tell your HOA friend if he files, we counterclaim harassment. V. Cho. I printed it and pinned it above the espresso bar. Still, I tightened the operation. We added parking lot signage to streamline traffic, hired a part-time security guard at night, mostly for optics, installed a decibel monitor near the speaker box. Anything they could possibly twist, I corrected in advance. We didn't just comply. We overcomplied, and it drove them mad. Grayson, once the untouchable emperor of Willow Creek, had lost his grip. His influence waned. Residents began questioning other rules. Why were mailbox heights regulated? Why couldn't kids use sidewalk chalk? Why were backyard chickens banned, even if they were quiet? My quiet rebellion had become a mirror, and the HOA didn't like what it showed. Then came the final blow. One morning, a city truck pulled up across the street. 2 workers unloaded a steel pole and a green and white sign. Municipal parking. 15 minutes limit. Daily drip customers only. It was official. The city had designated 2 public spots just outside my boundary line for short-term customer use. It wasn't a huge win, but it was visible, public, irrefutable. I didn't request it. Turns out one of our regulars, Jasmine, who ran the front desk at City Zoning, had pulled a few strings. I brought her a free mocha that afternoon. When Grayson saw the new sign later that day, I swear his SUV swerved. That night, Marie and I sat on the porch, 2 coffees in hand, listening to the soft hum of the espresso machine echoing from the building. You think it's over? She asked. I shook my head. Not yet. She leaned into my shoulder. But we're winning. I didn't answer, because she was right. By late spring, the Daily Drip had become more than a coffee shop. It was a landmark, a line on the map between control and community. We were featured in the local paper. Rancher brews a cup of rebellion, the headline read, complete with a photo of me smiling behind the counter, while Clara whipped up cappuccinos with military precision. Online reviews poured in. Our average was 4.9 stars. People drove from 2 towns over just to see the place that told an HOA to go kick rocks. But Grayson wasn't finished. Desperation has a smell. I could sense it on the wind. The HOA had lost control of the narrative. Their attempts to strangle the business had backfired. Their town hall schemes had turned against them. Their last weapon was fear, and they intended to use it. So they turned inward. They called for a special vote, an emergency proposal to change the HOA bylaws and redefine the community border. If passed, it would absorb the buffer zone where the Daily Drip sat, retroactively placing the shop within HOA control. If it worked, they could shut me down with 1 meeting and a majority vote. Dirty, legal, ruthless. The ballot required 2/3 support. Grayson was banking on apathy and intimidation, quiet knocks on doors, veiled threats about property values and neighborhood image. His board members whispered to new families that supporting the change would protect their investment. They told the older residents it was just a formality. It was a classic tactic. Rewrite the rules once you're losing under the old ones. But they underestimated how far the winds had shifted. Clara called me that night. They're trying to sneak it through, she said. Door-to-door collection. No meeting. No debate. I already had a plan. We printed flyers the next morning. Your coffee, your voice, your vote. Underneath, a simple message. They tried to shut down your coffee. Now they're trying to rewrite the map. This isn't just about one shop. This is about what kind of community we want. We delivered them ourselves, not with pitchforks or protests, just conversations. Marie knocked on doors. Clara canvassed the park. One of my baristas, Kyle, a college freshman with a mop of curly hair, posted QR codes linking to the HOA's own bylaw draft. We weren't loud. We were clear, and it worked. Neighbors who had never attended a meeting showed up. Families who barely waved on garbage day started talking across fences. One dad told me, "I never liked Grayson, but I didn't realize how far they were willing to go. My wife said she'll bake a cake if you win." Ballots were due Friday. The final count will be announced at a public meeting on Saturday morning. I barely slept that week. Saturday came. I stood in the back of the community center again, this time not alone. Marie was beside me. Clara, Kyle, even Reggie showed up in a suit 2 sizes too big, sipping a quarter dew and smirking. Grayson walked in, flanked by 2 board members. His eyes met mine, cold, controlled, but his hands were tight behind his back, clasped hard. The board treasurer stood at the podium, holding an envelope. Proposal 117 B, motion to expand jurisdictional boundaries of Willow Creek Estates HOA. A long breath. Fails. 61% oppose. Silence. Then the applause erupted. Not loud, but confident. The sound of a community that had finally stood up and said no more. Grayson didn't stay. He turned and walked out, head high, shoulders tight. But there was no hiding the truth. He had lost. Completely. The weeks after felt like spring after a long winter. The HOA board faced pressure from within. One member resigned. Another was voted out at the next cycle. Clara, bless her, accepted a nomination and became the first write-in to ever win a board seat in Willow Creek history. She celebrated with a triple espresso and a slice of almond cake at the Drip. Business boomed. We expanded the patio, added a small book nook, even hosted an open mic night on Fridays. Reggie strung up Edison bulbs between the trees, and Marie started baking her own cinnamon rolls to sell on weekends. And one Tuesday afternoon, as I was restocking cups, a city zoning officer pulled up. He stepped out, sunglasses on, holding a clipboard. My stomach dropped. "Everything okay?" I asked. He grinned. "Better than okay." He handed me a letter, official city stationery. Notice of provisional landmark status consideration. The Daily Drip, cultural and community use. "We don't do this often," he said, "but the mayor's office got wind of the story. Said your place reminded them what local business is supposed to be." I stared at the paper, then at him. "You're kidding." He shrugged. "Tell your HOA. Might want to put on a mug." That night, I sat on the porch again. The stars were out. The air was soft. And from the distance came the comforting sound of a milk frother, laughter from the patio, and music playing low through the speaker system. Something acoustic. Something homey. Marie brought me a cup of coffee. Black, no sugar. "To peace?" she asked. I shook my head. "To earn peace." We clinked mugs. And just then, headlights crept slowly past a ranch. I recognized the SUV even before I saw the license plate. Grayson. He didn't slow down this time. Didn't stop. Just drove on by. But I knew he saw the full parking lot, the glowing sign, the people reading under string lights and sipping caramel cold brews. He saw what I had built, not in spite of him, but because of him.